The Filipino culture is very hierarchical, and I know that when a lot of Americans first enter the market, there is a bit of a learning curve there. How have you, respecting that hierarchy while also trying to drive innovation from within the team?
Obviously respecting the fact that there's a hierarchy. You have to respect that, right? But trying to balance that with a culture that rewards innovation, that rewards risk-taking, that says it's okay to make mistakes. And I think that the only way that people believe you that it's okay to make mistakes is for you to own up to mistakes, right? And that level of accountability and setting that example is really, really key. And so at all of our town halls, I always point to something that we could have done better, that I could have done better personally, right? Because I think it's important that's as public as it's going to get, as at a town hall meeting.
Mabuhay, Brett. Welcome to Founders and Empanadas.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thanks
Looking forward to these empanadas.
Yeah, let's get in there. So we got some Filipino specialty empanadas with egg inside.
All right.
Salud.
Salud.
Cheers. Pretty good. What do you think?
That's good. Tasty.
So I'm going to take a risk here and get this bag of vinegar. Let's see how this goes.
All right.
Good luck.
You got the tips. Let's see if you can do it.
Oh, I think I'm supposed to do it this way around. Nope. Okay, I'm getting the frantic shaking of my nose. Okay.
I feel like that's gonna spray on me, but keep going.
There we go. Get a little empanada sauce, a little vinegar sauce. Okay. Oh man.
There you go.
Thank you. All right, we survived. Awesome. Well, this is a very special episode, recording in Manila, Philippines, and very glad to have you on board, Brett. Brett and I have known each other for a couple of years. Every time I come over to Manila, I got to meet up with you, and it's been amazing to see kind of the progress of Mosaic and running a VC-backed tech company from the Philippines. So today's topic will be around Filipino cultural nuances and best practices for working with Philippines-based teams.
Great.
And I'd love to kick it off by just learning a little bit more of the origin story of Mosaic and how you landed in Manila.
Sure. Without getting into too much detail and boring you with history, the quick backstory is I was at a startup in the web 1.0 or internet or .com bubble or whatever you want to call it. Back in the late 90s, San Francisco, that's how I cut my teeth in startups. We had joined just before we raised our Series C, helped manage that team through the downturn in 2001, which is pretty similar to the downturn recently, I'd say, across Southeast Asia recently on the tech side. We sold that business in 2002. And then fast forward a few years after a time at Gap, went and got back into kind of growing businesses again, worked for a hybrid family office VC fund. We invested in a restaurant technology company out of Toronto, where I sort of parachuted in and helped that business grow and looked at some add-on acquisitions. They were looking to grow and expand internationally. I've always wanted to do something in this region of the world, sort of generally speaking. And so in 2015, I started coming over and making some market checks in various Southeast Asian markets. One of them was the Philippines. Loved what I saw at that point in time in terms of what I wanted to build for a software solution focused really on F&B. And how much of how important that was from a cultural perspective and from an economic perspective in terms of driving this market. So checked a lot of boxes. We moved here 8 years ago last month. We had twin 1-year-old boys at the time when we moved here. My wife came here, I think as you heard the other night, sight unseen because we had young kids. So she's been incredibly supportive throughout this journey, thankfully. And so, I had some history on the restaurant side, on the retail side, on the restaurant technology side. All those things sort of point together as to how could we solve pain points, and how could we do it in a market that was really just starting to embrace cloud technology at that time. So that's kind of the backstory of how we got started. We started Mosaic in 2016, kind of first customer in early 2017, licensing the technology at first of that company I mentioned, and then while we were building out everything ourselves. And so we've built out Mosaic in 2017 through 2019 as we were bootstrapping the business as well. It took a bit longer to build out the whole platform, but we now are really the only ones in this market that marry front of house, which is you walking in and buying the empanadas and interacting with the cashier or server who's entering your orders into the POS, and then back of house, which is everything that goes into that, right? So inventory management, procurement, and then overall data and analytics.
Yeah. I think it's so fascinating that you made the move over to the Philippines with 1-year-olds, and it's very cool to see how they've grown up and now have a little bit of a Filipino accent when they're speaking in English.
Yes.
Walk me through what your biggest surprise has been, just from a more personal standpoint of kind of embracing the Filipino culture with your family and seeing your kids grow up here.
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise probably was, I don't think that if you would have asked either of us, you say, well, you're still going to be here 8 years on, that we would have said yes, right, at that point in time. So that's probably the biggest surprise. But I think that we've really come to love being here, and the kids, this is all they know. This is what they call home. And going back to the U.S. is a holiday, and this is home for them. And so I think one of the things that's just been really, really rewarding is watching them grow up here in a different culture, embracing that culture, interacting with kids from all different sort of socioeconomic backgrounds, because we lived in Boracay for a couple of years, as you know, as well, and really thriving in that overall sort of mix of environment of all different nationalities, but also all the different kids that they play with, on the playgrounds or wherever in the Philippines.
So cool. And walk me through a little bit more from the professional standpoint of how you've kind of embraced the Filipino culture and how you've just gained more cultural empathy from living here.
Sure. I think as an American who was kind of most recently in finance, at first when I came over here, it was it took a while for me to get used to that, right? Because I was very transactional, and I've always, even within finance and the industries I was in the U.S., I think I've always erred on the relationship side. Erred might be the wrong word, but lean toward the relationship side over the transactional side. But it's still within that culture, it's transactional in general, right? And so when I first got here, thankfully I had someone on my team at that point who was an American who had been in this region for 20 plus years and in the Philippines for 10 plus years, and he kind of helped walk me through some things as well, and would be like the guy in the ear of a politician, right, who's saying, this is his name, this is what you should be saying, or those kinds of things, right? So, but so it didn't, as much as it was a bit of a surprise for me, and it was a transition, it didn't take much for me to lean into it, because I like relationships. I like that side of business. I've always liked that side of business. And so, I think I probably, like I said, I think I was probably more of an outlier in the finance because of that, right? But it's been really fun to sort of embrace that even more and understand and look at how you manage a team with a much more high level of empathy around that as well. Because I think, listen, we've all had to manage teams through some really, really challenging situations, not least of which is pandemic. And that, regardless of where you were in the world, that was a really challenging time, and a time, if you weren't empathetic as a leader, then I don't think you're ever going to have empathy, right? And it was, and I remember very vividly the day we decided to send people home from the office back in 2020 was the day before they put in the lockdowns, right? Because we wanted to manage that message, and we wanted to make people understand that we don't know what's happening, right? But we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that we can support you and your families through this time. And so we didn't want people scrambling or not being able to have their laptop or not be whatever. So we just said, hey, everyone, this is your last day in the office. Take whatever you want. Take whatever you think you're going to need. I have no idea how long this is going to be, but we're here for you, and we'll do all we can to support you and your families and, quite frankly, our clients during that time as well. And that was a really, if I think of like one story where I realized just the power of transparency and empathy, it's that day, right? Because I got really emotional during that time. I get emotional now even thinking about it, but I got really emotional in having that conversation with my team. And I think they appreciated the fact that I didn't know what was going to happen, right? And I was honest about that, but I wanted to be there and be supportive as much as possible. And I think that was a bit of a kind of a crossover moment for parts of the team as well, where they realized like, hey, we're all one, and we're gonna do whatever it takes to sort of make this work. And as a software that was supporting restaurants, that was a really challenging time, right? So that team spirit and mentality was really, really important.
Yeah. Not only are you and your team, were they facing the unknown in just the pandemic impacting their lives, but also the business and their livelihood of, hey, all of our customers are shutting down too. What's the next chapter for us?
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that we did, just to build off of that, is like one of the first things we did is I sent a letter to all of our clients and just said, hey, we're not going to charge you during this time. We want you to use the software. We hope it's supportive. We'll figure it out whenever ECQ ends, right?
Yep.
Not knowing that it was going to be 4 or 5 months before that happened, and we had to inject more cash into the business that we kind of personally sort of bootstrapped, but it was the right thing to do, right? From a business perspective.
Yep. How's the empanada?
It's good. I had to get back into it.
I recommend the vinegar if you're
okay.
If you're
that seemed risky,
the
but
danger zone.
I'll give it a shot here in a little bit.
So I love the packaging. A little vinegar in a plastic bag. One of my favorite Filipino treats is getting a bag of Coca-Cola in a giant plastic bag off the side of the street. Nice hot day. That's my go-to.
Yeah.
Awesome, Brett. So the Filipino culture is very hierarchical, and I know that when a lot of Americans first enter the market, there is a bit of a learning curve there. How have you adjusted to respect the hierarchical structure of team setups and balanced respecting that hierarchy while also trying to drive innovation from within the team?
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. Because my personal nature is to be really transparent, really open, and I want people to question things. But it's hard to get that because it's a level of trust that you need to build up first to say, hey, do you really want our opinion, or are you just saying this and this is going to backfire on me, right? I don't want to walk down that line if it's not going to work. And so it took a while for my team to realize. I mean, it took many meetings of me saying, okay, any questions? Like, I know there are questions. Somebody ask a question, right? So, yeah, if no one's gonna ask a question, I'll ask a question that I would ask if I were you, right? So so slowly, those levels became fewer and fewer, and they became more to the surface, right? And so I think that having that transparency, having that level of trust with your team helps everyone and still obviously respecting the fact that there's a hierarchy. You have to respect that, right? But trying to balance that with a culture that rewards innovation, that rewards risk-taking, that says it's okay to make mistakes. And I think it's that last piece is really important. And I think that the only way that people believe you that it's okay to make mistakes is for you to own up to mistakes, right? And that level of accountability is and personal accountability and setting that example is really, really key. And so at all of our town halls, I always point to something that we could have done better, that I could have done better personally, right? Because I think it's important that's as public as it's going to get is at a town hall meeting. And it's important that people understand that I know that I could have done better in X, Y, Z, and that's okay, right? And then we will do better next time. And so then when I ask questions about a product feature or a timeline of a release or what could we do better from a process perspective, people then start to say, hey, it's okay if I throw out an idea that maybe I haven't fully baked in my head yet, right? Or it's okay to try something new from a process perspective. It's okay to try a feature that, maybe it's not 100% ready, but let's put it out there and let's test it and let's be agile and let's figure out how to make it better, right? And so, but it has to be you, I think, as a leader, setting that example and setting that tone.
Couldn't agree more. Just got back from a leadership retreat where we went through a process of me asking for feedback very openly in front of the entire team.
Okay.
And look, sitting in the shoes of Filipino employee, Indian employee, it's tough at times to get feedback, especially to a CEO. The risks can outweigh the rewards.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Hey, just like maybe I would gain one point by giving a piece of feedback while risking 10 points of negatively losing my job.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But yeah, to your point, just modeling feedback, modeling transparently, hey, I dropped the ball on XYZ, that I found is, for working especially with Philippines teams, being very intentional about that has helped kind of break down the resistance towards feedback.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah, that's a really good example because I've tried that before too, and it's asking for feedback or what could I be doing better is challenging, right? So it's kind of like, how do you break that down into pieces? Okay, what could have gone better on this one thing, and then who should have been the owner of that? Me. Okay, so then let's talk about that, right? So yeah, I agree.
And for listeners that have Philippines-based teams, I think even just modeling very specific questions for them. Things like, rate my performance 1 through 5, with 5 exceeding expectations, 3 meeting it, 1 not meeting it at all. What's one specific thing that I did well, and what's one specific thing that could be done better? And like giving them examples, like yesterday I wasn't proactive with my communications around this issue, but just modeling exactly what you're looking for in a feedback and giving them that template, I found helps a lot too.
Yep. That's a really good one for sure.
Awesome. One other concept in the Philippines that I've come to learn about is pabibo and the negative connotation of drawing attention to yourself. And that can be challenging sometimes when working with US-based startups where we need to speak up, we need to challenge things for processes that don't work. How have you been able to incentivize your teammates to kind of let out that pabibo, even though it has a bit of a negative connotation from maybe their prior workplaces or education growing up?
Yeah, I think it's a good one. It's that continuum of sort of independence versus interdependence, right? In the U.S. is very, very focused on independence and look at me, and I would say the Philippines is almost the opposite end of the spectrum in general, right? I think that's changing. It's somewhat generational as well. But what we do is, I don't know, you do this as well. I've seen in your social, and I think it's really important, is shine a light on employees. They might not shine a light on themselves, right? So every town hall, we have one reward or one awardee around each of our core values, right? And the manager is the one who introduces the person and talks about the person and what they've done well, and it's this sort of grand reveal of who the employee really is, right? But I think it's really important, again, that comes from somebody. It's not me, because it feels more part of their own sort of group barcada. It feels more of their own. It's okay because it's one of their own sort of talking about them and putting them out there in terms of getting the spotlight. So that's one thing that we do, and we're trying to do that a bit more, with a bit more frequency as well, in smaller ways too. With now we do kind of like Friday, like within teams, like a channel of sort of Friday shout outs, like gratitude, right, to people. And I think those things where you sort of turn the camera, you turn the light on to people in a way that's not like too jarring, you start to realize, hey, it's okay to sort of raise my hand and question things. It's okay to raise my hand and say, hey, don't you think that this amazing feature is really cool, and it just drove this X amount of revenue? Like, I would like some credit for that, right? It's okay to say those kinds of things, and in a lot of cases people won't, and so I think we as leaders and my leadership team is really empowered to make sure that people are highlighted, to make sure that people are rewarded, to make sure that people are thanked. And I think that last part is really, really important as part of this, because it's around that feeling of gratitude and thanks and respect for their contribution. And if that's not there, no one's ever going to raise their hand and say, hey, well, look, what about me, right? Look what I did. So I think that's part of that. And the other part, I guess, to your question is, or your example is questioning things as well. And I think, again, that has to come through trust, transparency, and modeling behavior, right? And those three things, I think those three things are really, really important. And I'll say them probably again and again, but that those three are really, really important to building a strong working culture in a lot of countries, but definitely in the Philippines in terms of the cultural aspects of it, and the sort of intermingling of sort of family culture, Philippines culture, and work culture, right? And how all those things sort of play together.
And it's amazing how far little tokens of recognition, whether that's a printed out certificate or a little pin, will go with kind of making it okay to give the spotlight to certain employees. Yeah,
exactly. It doesn't have to be massive, right?
Yep.
It just needs to be genuine and from a recognition perspective.
Yep. So you just touched on the interesting piece about the intermingling of family with work culture. And family is so core to everything about the Philippines. That's why I love this country so much.
Same. Yeah.
And how has that focus on family changed your management style?
That's a good question. I guess a few different ways. One is, I start meetings a bit more slowly in terms of easing into things, because I want to check in with people as well, right? And so, and that took me a while. Admittedly, it took me, and I don't nail it every meeting for sure, but sometimes I just need to get in, get out, and be done, right? But I think that connection is really important. Or even just sitting around in the pantry or the canteen and having a meal or a coffee with somebody and asking what's going on. Or I think I really like it because it enables me to bring my own family into the mix a bit more. And I think as a startup founder, there unfortunately isn't much of a line between startup and family, right? Especially as a sole founder, where you're kind of bootstrap the business for a while, and you've sort of, you need to make it work. And so it's important for me is to have my kids understand exactly, what's happening, what I'm doing, what the sacrifices are that we as a family are making, and why that's important, and what that means in terms of the whole family of Mosaic, right? And everybody that's been an employee, is an employee, and their families that they're supporting as well. And I think it's, even though my kids are only 9, I think that's really started to sink in over the last few years, because it's okay for me to bring them around the office. It's okay to bring them to events, and so they interact, and the employees know them. And I think that I've been reading a bit about this recently. It's come up in a few different articles, I think, but this idea that a company is not a family. It shouldn't be a family. You shouldn't use that term for. I don't buy that, right? I mean, I know that in a lot of countries, the U.S. in particular, probably feels super cliche to say that, right? And forced, but it doesn't feel forced. It feels very natural here, and I think maybe I'm very fortunate, right? I think I am very fortunate, really fortunate to have the team that I have, that have stuck by me through some really hard times over the last 7 years that we've really been running the business, and especially during the pandemic and sort of coming out of the pandemic. And it's because of the fact that genuinely people there believe they are part of the family, and they should, right? Because I believe that as well. And if I just say that and it's very shallow, then yeah, it is a cliche, and I shouldn't be saying that, right? But it's a family, and I think that also, because of that, you can have some of those harder conversations that you might not be able to have with people if they just view themselves as employees and clock in, clock out, and be done, right? And just like any family, not every day is great, right? But you sort of come back and you get back on it, and then you try to make it better the next day. And I think that there is that you I shouldn't say to be successful, but for my personality to be successful here, you have to really embrace that, right? And it's not a reach for me. It's not it feels real. It is real, and so I think it matches really well with who I am from a leader and from a person perspective as well.
I see a lot of parallels there between New York and Mosaic. I was also very resistant to calling the team a family. I find it very cliche, and I like to use the Netflix example of we're a sports team, that does work well with my Colombia team, but with the Philippines team, between themselves they still very much use the Neo family verbiage, and at this point I let it go. But interestingly, there is more of a kind of a safety net as an employer that I feel for the Philippines team versus like an American teammate. Like here, if there's a typhoon that's blowing people's roofs off, New York is a lever for them to get salary loans and get kind of that external support that they need, where in the US it's a lot less of a common practice. And it's just a matter of kind of embracing it. That's the norm, and that's what's going to build loyalty here.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think we need to do a little empanada round 2.
Okay.
Let me get in there.
So you need this one, right?
Yeah, let's try switching it.
There you go. Your hard work there, you're done.
You feeling dangerous today? You want to get in there?
I am still not feeling super dangerous, but let's see. Okay.
You can do it, Brett. You got this. Hey, okay.
No, just don't sit there.
I've seen worse on previous episodes, so you did great.
Vinegar helps. That's good.
Yep. So, speaking of just recognition and some Filipino cultural norms, yesterday I came back from Naga on my flight from Naga to Manila, and there was a 5-minute period that was like the most Filipino experience. Just like if you had to embody Philippines culture in 5 minutes, this is what it was. It was the flight attendant running a game for everyone on the flight.
Yep.
I get very competitive with those, so of course had to raise my hand and get in there before she finished the question on some sort of holiday. And then as we're walking out, they're doing the Cebu Pacific Sebgo theme song that everyone was singing along to. Only in the Philippines. But I've seen you also with your team. You do kind of similar, embracing the ridiculousness with games.
For sure.
Someone getting the Jollibee bee to twerk on you during your birthday.
Yes.
But yeah, walk me through kind of your experience with that when you were early on in the Mosaic days and how you've come to embrace that.
Yes, yeah. So I'd say early on, I was not as much as I love holidays, I have to say, first of all, and I love Christmas, and I'm in the right country because it starts in September here, and I'm okay with that. It's always a joke around our house as to when we're going to put up our own Christmas decorations. So it's exactly the first day of November because we have to get through Halloween first with decorations there. We try not to mix, but after that it's good. But even with that said, at first I was like, oh, we really have to have a Thanksgiving dinner. We have to have like all these different things that my head of people at the time was saying we need to time to do this, we need to do this, and I was like, really? Like, can't people just work? And so, but I realized very quickly just how important that is, right? Just how important it is to have the birthday celebrations, to have the silly games, to have people see me okay with, not being a CEO for that period of time and just being one of the people who are also willing to make a fool of myself during that time, in my mind, right? I mean, so one thing I am really poor at still is singing, and I don't think that's ever going to change. So I try to do any karaoke as part of a group rather than in solo, okay. But I think it's better for everybody that way. But no, we just had a town hall, and we did the traditional, like the bingo, the local bingo, which is really fun. And it was one of those things where it doesn't take massive prizes to make everybody really happy and to your point, competitive during those games as well, right? So, I mean, I think in your example in Cebu Pacific, it's like they're having out like pencil kits or bags, right? But I mean, every hand goes up right away, right? So mine included. So yeah, I mean, I think those are the little things that I think if you look at companies coming in, they overlook, right? Or they say, couldn't you be more efficient if you didn't do that? And my answer is no, I don't think you could be, right? I think, could you do more work during that one day? Yes. Would that make you more efficient over a time period? No, right? So I think it's taking that longer term approach, and it does go back to that belief that has to be there that, hey, we're all part of a team and we're all having fun together, and yeah, I mean, I look forward. I love those days when we have a town hall and then we do something social in the office and people are hanging out and we bring in barbecue or whatever it might be, and it's just everyone's on the same level and everyone's having a great time, and it's just it's really fun. So. I think that those games are important. It's really important. Yeah.
For our listeners that have remote teams in the Philippines, it's amazing how far a $10 Starbucks gift card, getting everyone together for just like a 15-minute trivia game, and the winner gets a Starbucks gift card. That will the rest of the day will be a hype session. For sure.
And that's what we do, and even we do it with some of our. I just get points or rewards from some of our clients and then give those. I mean, we're lucky to work with really fun clients, right? Like Pickup Coffee and others, where it's easy to say, hey, you just today won 500 pickup points. Like, go buy yourself a Spanish latte and a Pandesal, right? Or whatever it might be. And then so that doesn't take much, right? I mean, but it's really exciting, right? And because it happens. Especially if it's unexpected, I think it's even more fun for everybody.
Awesome. Brett, I also want to dive a little bit deeper into the topic of the Filipino concept of pakikisama, of having that smooth transition into a group setting, whether that's a new employee onboarding and kind of aligning with how the rest of the team dynamics are going, or in sales, being able to smoothly form that relationship when first meeting. So from a sales perspective, walk me through how you've come to learn that concept and how it's impacted your strategy for doing sales in the Filipino market.
Well, sure. I think that's that one comes with practice, I would say, right? And trial and error a little bit as well. So I think one of the sort of related topics to that, from a sales perspective, when you come here to the Philippines, is no one tells you no, right? So it doesn't mean that you're really vibing. It doesn't really mean that they're interested even in your product necessarily. It's just a sign of respect, right? So I would walk out of the first X number of months I was here, I'd walk out of meetings like, I just killed it. I nailed it. Never hear back, right? And I'm like, what is going on? What's happening? And in my mind, I was just like, just tell me no. I just want to hear no. But it's not going to happen, So, I mean, of course, I'd much rather hear yes, but I just want an answer. I wanted something, right? So it took me a while, and now I understand, like, anything other than signing a contract is a no, whether or not it's verbalized, right? Ever. So now I think what we try to do from a sales perspective, because of that, is have like an expiry period on every stage of the pipeline, right? So we say, hey, if we haven't heard back within this amount of time, it's probably not going to happen, right? It's probably not going to happen. Let's just move it to as much as it pains all of us in biz dev and sales to move something to closed lost. That's, I haven't actually been said that it's closed lost. It needs to be moved, right? So that's one of the things that we've done on that side. And I think in terms of like your question around kind of assimilating people into a team in a smooth way, and I think we've had, just like any company, we've had some challenges with that. We probably admittedly overgrew some groups in our team, and we had to painfully make some cuts. And that's always the worst thing to do as a leader, is to tell somebody that they're losing their jobs because of decisions that you made, essentially, right? And sometimes that works out where that person understands that they're not assimilating, they're not part of that, right? But still, it's like you made a bad hiring decision at that point in time. You put that person into a position that wasn't a really good fit. And so, and we've done that, right? I've definitely had turnover even on my senior leadership team, where I thought I'd hired the right person for the right spot, and this is going to, we all thought that this is going to J curve us. This is going to be that's the hires, right? And in hindsight, they were wrong, right? They were wrong, and not to necessarily any fault of theirs, but that fit, that match that you're talking about, just wasn't there, and I probably should have seen it, right? And so I think now we really try to hire a lot more for fit, a lot more for potential, and try to grow people internally within what what we know to be our kind of our ethos, our culture, and what we want people to be able to do, right? And I think if you do that, even if those people eventually move on to something else, to me, that's still rewarding, right? I mean, I just told that to a couple of people who resigned recently and moved on, and they were both in very different roles, but they were both very nervous to tell me that they were resigning, and I was 100% supportive. Like, that's great. I think that you learned a ton. I appreciate everything you've done for this business. You've stuck with us for a number of years, and again, through some pretty challenging times at points, and to see you go out and go do something else, like, that's rewarding for me as well. Like, yeah, when I was in the U.S., I don't think I was in a job for more than 5 years, max 5 years, right? So I think it's I have no problem with that, and people sort of learning and growing, and we try to push them and help them, and hopefully they can stay within the business. But if they need to move on to something else, that's great. I mean, and I think for me, it's just I just want to make sure that we're making the right hiring decisions, because post Series A 2022, we grew too quickly and we hired too many people. And I probably lost track of my importance as part of the hiring process during that time as well, and just said, go hire, and this is who I want, go find that person, pick them out from somebody else and put them in this role. And that leadership team that we had then, only 2 of 7 are still with me through different, whether it's resignation or attrition or retrenchment. But it's a really good lesson of, you need to think about fit, potential, and are we all kind of rowing the same direction, right? Because if you're not, especially as a startup, you're in real trouble.
Yeah. I want to dive a little bit more into your hiring decisions around the engineering org at Mosaic, and walk me through it too from a just cultural nuance standpoint. How does a Filipino engineers problem-solving approach differ in general from like U.S.-based talent?
Yeah, I think that it's one of the big things really is around this concept of alignment and groupthink relative to independent thinking as well, right? So even as an engineer who's probably someone who's stereotype of just sort of sitting in a dark room and coding all by themselves and being really happy to do that, even with that, there still needs to be sort of a team element to that, right? And a team alignment, and there's still the hierarchy as well, right? So I think that's one of the big things on the engineering side here that's different in other markets, is in a role that is very independent, it's still not that independent, right? And that was one of the harder things for me to sort of wrap my head around, because that was very different from engineers that I had worked with previously. And I think from a problem-solving perspective, I think the other thing is, and we've had some product issues in the past, and we try to learn from those, obviously, and make sure we don't repeat them. But I think one of the things that can happen is you start to get into the mindset of, well, it's not that bad, right? It's not that, like, it's okay. Like, no one complained about it verbally today, so it's okay, right? And that's not the mindset you can have if you're going to have a top shelf product, right? And you want to drive the market in terms of innovation. And I think, and that's unfortunately, I think a product of kind of historical and sort of growing up in the Philippines, where they had, people had to deal with a lot of stuff that wasn't that bad, right? So public transportation, not that bad. Government bureaucracy, not that bad, right? So you just sort of get used to it. You get used to queuing up for hours and waiting for something that should take 5 minutes, right? And so that seeps in a little bit, I think, into what your sort of rating system is internally. And so we have to really focus people on, like, not that bad is still bad. As a product developer, as an engineer, as a company that is like stakes our claim on innovation, not that bad is bad. And so that's something I think you have to really be careful in hiring in that engineering role as well. And thankfully we've made some really good hires in that space that have been with us for a while and really driven us from, we decided during the pandemic that we were going to sort of stop incrementally evolving the product and kind of rethink and reimagine and reinvent the product. And those engineers that really helped sort of drive that and visualize that and sort of strategize that are still with us now and driving, again, the next evolution of the product, right? So we've been really, really fortunate from a doer's perspective within the engineering team to be able to hire the right people.
And you touched on the need for that group harmony. Do you have any concrete examples you can share of how you've been able to balance the respect for group harmony while also keeping individuals accountable?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we did there is when we were again we had these product issues coming out of the pandemic, maybe 2023, I guess it was. We just decided that we would take it as a cross-functional team and park it over here to sort of attack what was happening, why, and how we fix this really, really quickly, right? And because we took it out of the hierarchy of the org chart and put it over here, it enabled people to speak up and feel okay with that, right? And because it wasn't that they had to report up to their team lead and then up to the engineering director and then up to the CTO, right? This is just everybody trying to solve a problem. And so I think taking that approach, we've now pushed it back into our overall org structure as well and just have more of a pod approach when it comes to product. So we have engineers, product managers, QA, kind of all trying to within certain pods, so that they feel that they can again raise their hand and report something that isn't going well, or a way to drive a process more efficiently. So I think that's one of the things that we did. We kind of learned on the fly, really, was this idea of taking something outside of the regular org structure was super helpful in allowing people to feel like it was okay. And so then we had to, okay, what did we learn from that? How do we apply that back into the day-to-day operations as well? And so that's one thing that we have done. I think the other thing is I'm really hands-on as a founder, for better or worse. And I think there's been a ton of articles written both ways over the last few years, right? I wouldn't say that I micromanage, because I'm not telling people what to do, but I'm in those meetings and I want to hear that discussion, right? And that's probably how I've picked up a lot of Tagalog or Taglish, is because I just say, speak however you want to, solve the problems. I'm here as a resource and I want to hear what's going on. I'm not solving this for you, right? And so I think that those conversations also become really helpful. Like if the CEO is in the room and I'm still allowed to say things that might be disharmonious, and he's saying things that certainly are disharmonious at times, like, it's okay, right? It's okay. And I'm not going behind the back of a manager, because everyone's in the same room, everyone's having the same conversation, right? And so sometimes I'll even skip down a level and just say, hey, what do you think about this problem, right? Because a lot of times there is someone who has already thought about it, but maybe just hasn't pushed it up the ranks, right? The right way. And so I think having that, having those sort of one-on-one meetings with people as well, where I've been able to sort of elicit some things that they might not have wanted to say in that group setting, also is helpful, right? So that's those skip level sort of one-on-ones I find super helpful for our team.
Awesome, Brett. Final question for you.
Yeah.
What's one strongly held belief that you have that you would say 99% of people disagree with?
Oh, wow. That's a good question.
Give me your best hot take.
I think that Southeast Asia, the sort of startup ecosystem and the venture capital groups that have supported that ecosystem still have a long way to go to sort of evolve and mature and get to the point where you're going to see like meaningful exits year after year in this region. And I think that that's coming in here when I did and sort of that lead up to 2020, where a lot of funds were raised in 2019 and 2020, and everyone thought there was just going to be this like harvesting of unicorns that was going to happen, right? It's unrealistic. It's not, and I think so. In my mind, I actually am a really big believer in the fact that we should be trying to drive businesses that are growing to be sustainable, 50, 100, 150 million dollar businesses, maybe 200 million dollar business, and not worry about what might happen on top of that, right? And I don't think that excuse me, I don't think the VC community has gotten there yet in this sector. I think a lot more founders now that I talk to believe that, but wouldn't say that because they have VC money already. I have VC money already as well, but I think that the ecosystem would be better off if you were trying to grow $100 million businesses that are sustainable businesses, that are profitable businesses. And then I'm just not sure that doesn't necessarily equate to the way the VC market is built, right? But I that's what I think that this region, that's what the goal should be.
Excellent. Well, Brett, where can people find out more about you and Mosaic online?
We're at Mosaic Solutions. We have our website, mosaic-solutions.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm there as well. So reach out if you want to talk about technology, software, Philippines. Happy to talk about all of those topics for sure.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Brett.
Thanks for the empanadas as well. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Cheers.